Office simp revealed my lover to my husband during Christmas party. Hi Reddit, my name is Sophie and I'm 30 years old. I've been married to my husband Jack for 7 years. Jack is the kind of man anyone would call a good husband. He's dependable, hardworking, and above all, loyal. He's always been there for me, no matter what. When we first got married, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Jack made me feel safe, loved, and like I could do anything as long as he was by my side. But over time, something changed. Our marriage started to feel routine. Jack works as a project manager for a construction company, and his job can be demanding. Over the past few years, he's been putting in longer and longer hours to support us. He says it's because he wants to give me the life I deserve, but sometimes it feels like he's married to his job instead of me. I know he means well, but the truth is I started to feel invisible. It was like I wasn't Sophie, his wife, anymore. I was just a part of the house, something he came home to after a long day of work. That's when Alex came into the picture. Alex is 28, and he's one of the managers at the company where I work. From the moment he started, he was the kind of guy who turned heads, confident, charming, and always dressed impeccably. He has this way of making you feel like you're the most important person in the room, and I'll admit, I was drawn to him almost immediately. At first, it was harmless. We'd chat during breaks, share a few laughs at team meetings, and sometimes exchange texts about work projects. But over time, those texts became more frequent and less about work. Before I knew it, we were meeting for drinks after hours, and one thing led to another. I know what I did was wrong. I knew it even as it was happening, but in the moment, I told myself it wasn't that bad. Alex made me feel alive again, like I mattered. He told me I was beautiful, smart, and funny, the kind of compliments I hadn't heard from Jack in years. I started living for those moments with Alex, for the way he made me feel. I told myself that as long as Jack never found out, I wasn't really hurting anyone. But of course, that's not how life works. For over a year, I juggled my double life. At home, I was Jack's loving wife, playing the part of a supportive partner while he worked tirelessly to keep our household running. At work, I was Alex's secret lover, sneaking off to hotels or stolen moments in his car during lunch breaks. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I knew it couldn't last forever, but I didn't expect it to come crashing down the way it did. Now you see Brian. Brian is a colleague of mine, and to put it bluntly, he's the office simp. Everyone knows Brian has a massive crush on me, but I never paid much attention to him. He's harmless, really, kind of awkward, always trying too hard to impress me. I figured his crush was innocent, just something he'd eventually grow out of. But what I didn't realize was that Brian had been watching me, paying closer attention to my behavior than I ever thought possible. It all came to a head at the office Christmas party. Jack had agreed to come with me that night, something he rarely did since he usually hated social events. I was nervous about having him there, but Alex assured me it would be fine. "We'll keep things professional," he'd said, flashing that confident smile that always made me believe him. But looking back, I should have known better. The party was a disaster waiting to happen. The Christmas party was supposed to be a fun, low-pressure event. Our company always went all out, renting a fancy venue and bringing in a catered dinner, live music, and an open bar. This year was no different. The party was at a sleek downtown hotel, the kind with marble floors and chandeliers that made everything feel glamorous. Everyone had been buzzing about it for weeks, and honestly, I was looking forward to it too. But I also felt this knot of anxiety in my stomach that I couldn't ignore. Jack was coming with me this year. Jack rarely attended work events. He wasn't a fan of dressing up or small talk, and he didn't know many of my colleagues well enough to feel comfortable. But when I asked him to come this year, he said yes without hesitation. Looking back, I wonder if he sensed something was off and wanted to keep an eye on things. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too focused on how I was going to juggle having Jack and Alex in the same room without raising suspicion. Alex and I had talked about it beforehand. We agreed to keep things professional, to avoid any interaction that might seem out of the ordinary. But even with that plan in place, I couldn't help but feel nervous. Over the past few weeks, Alex had gotten bolder at work. Little touches on my arm, lingering looks, inside jokes that only we understood. I told him to dial it back, but Alex was nothing if not confident. He didn't think anyone noticed, but I wasn't so sure. especially not when it came to Brian. Brian had been acting strangely for a while. He was always awkward around me, but lately his behavior had gone from endearing to uncomfortable. He'd stare at me a little too long during meetings, or hover near my desk, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't get the words out. I chalked it up to his crush and tried to ignore it. But in the weeks leading up to the party, he started making these weird comments, things like, "You and Alex sure seem close," or "It must be nice to have someone pay so much attention to you." I brushed him off, but his tone made my stomach turn. I didn't know how much he suspected, but I could tell he was watching me closely. The night of the party, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of disaster. I got dressed in a sparkly red cocktail dress that I knew Jack loved, hoping to keep his attention on me and away from Alex. When we arrived at the venue, Jack was in good spirits, shaking hands with my colleagues and making polite conversation. I introduced him to a few people, including Alex, who played his part perfectly, friendly but professional, like we were nothing more than coworkers. For a while, everything seemed fine. Jack was mingling, chatting with my boss and a few of my teammates, and I did my best to keep my distance from Alex without making it obvious. But every time I glanced across the room, I could feel Alex's eyes on me, and it sent a thrill of both excitement and panic through me. I knew we were playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. It was like a game, and I thought I was in control. And then there was Brian. He was lingering by the bar, watching everything. I could see him sipping his drink, his face flushed and his movements jittery. I told myself he was just nervous. It wasn't unusual for him to be awkward at social events. But there was something in the way he kept glancing between me and Alex that put me on edge. I tried to avoid him, but he kept inching closer to where Alex and I were standing, like he was waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. That moment came about an hour into the party. I was standing near Alex, chatting with a few coworkers, when Brian stumbled over, drink in hand. His face was red and his words were slurred, but his voice was loud enough to cut through the music. "So," he said, pointing at Alex, "you two think you're so sneaky, huh?" Everyone in the group froze. I felt my heart drop into my stomach as Brian took another step forward, swaying slightly. "You think no one's noticed," he continued, his voice rising. "But I've seen the way you look at each other. The little secret meetings, the disappearing acts. Everyone knows what's going on." I tried to laugh it off, to play it like a drunken misunderstanding. "Brian, I think you've had a little too much to drink," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "Maybe you should sit down." But he wasn't having it. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with something that looked like triumph. "Don't lie, Sophie. We all know you're sleeping with Alex." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The group around us fell silent, and I could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on me. I didn't even notice Jack at first, but then I heard his voice behind me, quiet and strained. "Is that true, Sophie?" I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, and his eyes were searching mine for some kind of answer. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't lie to him, not with everyone watching, not with Brian still standing there like he'd just won the lottery. Jack didn't wait for an explanation. He shook his head, his lips pressed into a thin line, and walked away without another word. I wanted to follow him, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. I could hear whispers spreading through the room, feel the judgmental eyes of my coworkers, and all I could do was stand there, frozen in place. Alex was nowhere to be found. He'd slipped away the moment things got messy, leaving me to deal with the fallout alone. That night didn't just ruin the party. It ruined everything. My marriage, my career, my reputation. Brian's outburst destroyed it all in one fell swoop. And now I'm left to pick up the pieces of a life I shattered with my own choices. When Jack walked out of the party, it felt like the world had tilted beneath my feet. I stood there, frozen, watching him disappear through the double doors. He didn't look back, and I didn't follow him. I couldn't. My legs felt like they'd turned to lead, and the whispers around me were getting louder, cutting through the pounding in my ears. Everyone was staring, some with pity, others with curiosity, but all I could focus on was the echo of Jack's expression burned into my mind. The hurt in his eyes, the way his face tightened as he waited for me to deny what Brian had said. I hadn't said anything, and now I'd lost him. I don't even remember how I got home that night. The drive back was a blur, and when I walked through the front door, the silence in the house was suffocating. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy and wrong. Jack was nowhere to be found. I searched every room, hoping he was just cooling off or waiting to talk, but it quickly became clear that he was gone. His things were missing: clothes, his duffel bag, even the essentials from the bathroom. It was like he had erased himself from the house in the span of a few hours. I tried calling him, my hands shaking as I dialed his number over and over again. Each time it went straight to voicemail. I left message after message, begging him to come home so we could talk, but the silence was deafening. That night I barely slept. I sat on the couch staring at the door, waiting for it to open. It never did. By morning, the realization that Jack had truly left started to sink in. Over the next few days, I kept trying to reach him, but it was like he had disappeared. The house felt emptier with every passing hour, every little thing a reminder of him. His favorite coffee mug was still on the counter, his slippers were by the door, and the faint smell of his cologne lingered in the bedroom. It was unbearable. I started to panic, not knowing where he was or what he was thinking. I couldn't stop imagining the look on his face at the party, the heartbreak and betrayal that I had put there. It haunted me. Then the calls started. His brother was the first to reach out, telling me in no uncertain terms that Jack was staying with him and didn't want to see or speak to me. It wasn't a conversation so much as a cold, cutting announcement that left no room for debate. I felt a mix of shame and anger, shame because I knew I deserved it, and anger because I wasn't even being given a chance to explain myself. When I tried calling his brother back later, there was no answer. Soon after, I found out that Jack had told both of our families about the affair. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. My parents called, distraught and disappointed. My mom couldn't understand how I could have done something like this, while my dad barely said a word. Jack's family was no different. His mom, who had always been warm and welcoming, made it clear that they were heartbroken for him and had no interest in hearing my side of the story. I felt completely isolated, cut off from everyone who had ever mattered to me. The whispers and judgment didn't stop with the families. Our mutual friends were starting to pull away too. People I thought I could rely on suddenly didn't have time for me, and the ones who did made it clear that they sided with Jack. Every day it felt like another person turned their back on me, and I couldn't blame them. I had built my life around this web of lies, and now it was unraveling in the most public and humiliating way possible. The house, once a place of comfort and stability, had become unbearable. Every room reminded me of what I had lost, and the weight of Jack's absence was suffocating. The silence was the worst part. Jack wasn't just gone physically, he had shut me out of his life completely. No calls, no texts, no explanations. Just an empty house, and the gnawing realization that I had destroyed the one person who had ever truly loved me. Looking back now, I can't pinpoint the exact moment things started to fall apart between Jack and me. It wasn't some big fight or sudden event that drove a wedge between us. It was slow, almost unnoticeable at first, like a crack in a windshield that spreads so gradually you don't realize it's there until it's too late. When we got married, I was convinced we had the kind of relationship that could weather anything. Jack was my rock. Steady, dependable, the kind of man who would do anything for the people he loved. And for a long time, that was enough. But over the years, things started to shift. Jack's job as a project manager for a construction company became more demanding. The long hours, the late-night phone calls, the endless spreadsheets and site visits, it all started to take over his life. At first, I tried to be supportive. I knew how much his career meant to him, and I wanted to believe that all the time he was putting in was for us, for our future. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into years, I started to feel like I was coming in second place, or maybe third, or not even on the list at all. He'd come home late, exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open long enough to eat dinner. Conversations became surface level and fleeting. "How was your day?" "Fine. Yours?" before he'd disappear into his office to finish whatever work he hadn't managed to get done during the day. Weekends weren't much better. If he wasn't catching up on sleep, he was catching up on work. I'd sit across from him at the breakfast table, watching him scroll through emails on his phone, and wonder if he even noticed me anymore, if he even cared. It wasn't just the lack of attention, it was the lack of effort. The little things he used to do, the things that made me feel loved and cherished, had disappeared. He used to surprise me with flowers, leave me little notes, hold my hand when we walked together. Those gestures had been replaced with a distracted kiss on the cheek and a quick "I love you" before he rushed out the door. I told myself it was just a phase, that things would get better once his workload eased up. But deep down, I started to wonder if this was just who we were now, a couple going through the motions, sharing a house but not much else. That's when Alex came into the picture. He was hired as a manager at my office about 2 years ago, and from the moment he walked in, he commanded attention. Alex was the kind of person who lit up a room, confident, charming, with an easy smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world when he looked at you. At first, I thought he was just another arrogant guy who liked to hear himself talk. But as I got to know him, I realized there was more to him than that. He was smart, driven, and ambitious, and he had this way of making you feel important, like your opinions mattered. We started off as colleagues, just two people working on the same projects and occasionally grabbing coffee together during breaks. But as the months went by, our conversations grew deeper, more personal. He'd ask about my life, my dreams, the things that made me happy, and he actually seemed interested in my answers. It was such a stark contrast to the silence I was met with at home that I couldn't help but be drawn to him. It didn't take long for the flirting to start. It was subtle at first, a lingering glance, a playful comment, the way his hand would brush against mine when he handed me a file. I told myself it was harmless, just a bit of fun to break up the monotony of the workday. But the truth is, I liked the attention. I liked the way he made me feel, desired, valued, like I was worth noticing. It was a feeling I hadn't had in years, and I craved it more than I wanted to admit. The first time we crossed the line was during a late-night work event. Jack was, of course, at home catching up on work, and Alex and I ended up staying late to finish a project. One minute we were laughing about something trivial, and the next, he leaned in and kissed me. I should have stopped him. I should have pulled away and told him it was a mistake, that I was married and this couldn't happen, but I didn't. I kissed him back, and in that moment all the guilt and doubt was drowned out by the rush of feeling wanted again. That kiss opened the floodgates. What started as stolen moments in the office quickly escalated into something more. Lunch breaks turned into secret rendezvous, and work trips became opportunities to spend time together, away from prying eyes. I knew it was wrong. Every time I looked at Jack, I felt a pang of guilt that I tried to bury as deep as possible. But I told myself that it wasn't hurting anyone. Jack was too busy with work to notice, and Alex made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I convinced myself that I deserved to be happy, even if that happiness came at the expense of my marriage. I kept telling myself that I was in control, that I could stop at any time if things got too complicated. But the truth is, I was addicted to the excitement, the secrecy, the way Alex looked at me like I was the most important person in the room. I started making excuses to see him, finding reasons to stay late at work, or take on extra projects that required his involvement. I became someone I barely recognized, someone who lied effortlessly and didn't think twice about the consequences of my actions. There were moments when the guilt would creep in, usually in the quiet hours of the night when Jack was asleep beside me, oblivious to the double life I was living. I'd watch him, his face peaceful and relaxed, and wonder how he would react if he knew the truth. But then morning would come, and I'd fall back into the same patterns, convincing myself that what Jack didn't know couldn't hurt him. I wish I could say that I stopped before things got out of hand, that I came to my senses and ended the affair before it was too late. But that's not what happened. I let it continue, telling myself that as long as I kept it a secret, everything would be fine. I was selfish, blind to the damage I was doing, and completely unprepared for the moment when it all came crashing down. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a week since everything fell apart at the Christmas party, and I still can't wrap my head around how quickly my life has spiraled out of control. Every time I close my eyes, I see Jack's face as he turned and walked out of that room. The look in his eyes wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something that made my stomach twist in a way I can't describe. And now, no matter what I do, I can't seem to undo the damage I've caused. Jack has filed for divorce. I found out a few days ago when a letter from his lawyer arrived. Seeing it sitting there in my mailbox was like a slap in the face, a stark reminder that this wasn't just a bad fight or a rough patch we could work through. This was real. Jack wasn't coming back, and he wasn't interested in hearing anything I had to say. He'd made up his mind, and now he was taking the steps to make it official. When I opened the letter, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. It outlined the terms he was seeking: division of assets, no spousal support, and a full accounting of our finances. It was cold and impersonal, like a transaction instead of the end of a 7-year marriage. But the part that hit me the hardest was the note about his refusal to communicate with me directly. All correspondence would go through his lawyer. He wanted nothing to do with me. I've tried reaching out to him anyway. I've called, texted, emailed, anything to get him to talk to me. I told him I was sorry, that I wanted to explain that we could work this out if he'd just give me a chance. But he hasn't responded to a single message. The silence is unbearable, and it's starting to feel like he's erased me from his life entirely. I can't stop thinking about how quickly everything fell apart. How I went from being his wife to being a stranger he wants nothing to do with. The fallout hasn't been limited to my personal life either. Work has become a living nightmare. At first, I thought things would blow over, that people would move on and forget about what happened at the party, but that hasn't been the case. Word spread quickly, and now it feels like I'm walking into a room full of whispers and sideways glances every time I show up at the office. People who used to smile and say hello now avoid eye contact, and the few who do speak to me keep the conversations short and strained. Brian, the coworker who exposed my affair, has somehow become the hero of the office. People are praising him for standing up for what's right and calling him brave for speaking out. Meanwhile, I've been painted as the villain, the woman who humiliated her husband and ruined the sanctity of the Christmas party. I hear the whispers when I walk by, the muttered comments about how I deserve everything that's happening to me. And the worst part is, I can't even argue with them. They're not wrong. But the hardest blow came from Alex, the man I risked everything for. After the party, I thought he'd at least be there for me, that we'd face the fallout together. But I couldn't have been more wrong. He's been avoiding me ever since that night, dodging my calls and making excuses whenever I try to talk to him. When I finally cornered him at work, he told me that the situation was too complicated and that he needed time to think. Time to think? I gave up my marriage, my reputation, and my stability for him, and now he's acting like I'm some burden he doesn't want to deal with. Hearing those words from Alex was like a punch to the gut. I thought we had something real, something worth fighting for, but now it feels like he's washing his hands of me to save his own skin. He's still charming, of course, still playing the part of the confident, untouchable manager. But beneath the surface, I can see the cracks, the nervous glances, the way he avoids being seen with me. It's clear he's trying to distance himself, and I can't help but feel like he's abandoned me when I need him most. I feel completely alone. The people who used to be my support system have turned their backs on me, and the one person I thought I could count on has made it clear that I'm on my own. I've been staying in the house Jack and I shared, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Everywhere I look, there are reminders of him, his favorite chair, the pictures we took on our anniversary, the little notes he used to leave me before he got too busy with work. It's like the house is haunted by the ghost of our marriage, and I can't escape it. The financial stress is starting to pile up too. With Jack filing for divorce, our joint accounts have been frozen, and I'm left scrambling to figure out how to cover the bills. The mortgage is overdue, the credit card companies are calling nonstop, and I feel like I'm drowning. Jack used to handle all of this, and now that he's gone, I'm realizing just how much I relied on him to keep everything running smoothly. I always thought of myself as independent, but now I see how much of that independence was an illusion. At night, when the house is quiet and the weight of everything feels unbearable, I find myself going over the choices that led me here. I think about the nights I spent with Alex, the lies I told Jack, the little justifications I made to convince myself that what I was doing was okay. I told myself I deserved to be happy, that Jack wouldn't notice, that it wasn't hurting anyone. But now I see how wrong I was. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a series of choices, each one chipping away at the foundation of my life until there was nothing left. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it's possible to fix it. Jack won't talk to me, my coworkers despise me, and Alex has made it clear that he's not interested in standing by me. I feel abandoned, overwhelmed, and completely lost. Every time I try to think about the future, it feels like a black hole, a void I can't even begin to comprehend. Reddit, I don't know what to do. How do I salvage my life when everything I built has crumbled around me? How do I move forward when I can't even look in the mirror without feeling disgusted with myself? Please, if anyone has advice, I'm begging you to share it. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how much longer I can keep my head above water.
Update.
Hi Reddit, it's been 2 weeks since I first posted here, and somehow things have managed to get even worse. I didn't think it was possible for my life to fall apart more than it already had. But here I am, staring at the wreckage and wondering if there's anything left to salvage. Every time I think I've hit rock bottom, something new happens that drags me down even further. I don't even recognize myself anymore. The biggest blow came a few days ago when I found out that Jack has started seeing someone new. I learned about it through a mutual friend, who apparently thought I deserved to know. She told me that Jack met her through his brother's circle of friends and that they've been spending a lot of time together. Her name is Erin, and from what I've been told, she's kind, supportive, and everything I never was. Hearing that made my stomach drop. The thought of Jack being with someone else so soon after leaving me is unbearable. I can't stop picturing them together, her laughing at his jokes, encouraging him in ways I didn't, being the partner I failed to be. It's like a dagger to the chest every time I think about it. I've tried convincing myself that it's just a rebound, that Jack is using her to distract himself from the pain of what I did. But the more I hear about her, the harder it is to hold on to that belief. Apparently, she's been a rock for him during this whole ordeal, helping him process everything and build a new life for himself. People who've met her say she's sweet and understanding, and they're happy Jack has found someone who appreciates him. I can't help but wonder if this is what he needed all along, someone who could give him what I couldn't. The thought keeps me up at night, gnawing at me like a wound that won't heal. As if that wasn't enough, Alex has officially been promoted and transferred to another office. I found out during a team meeting when our boss announced it like it was some great accomplishment. Everyone clapped and congratulated him while I sat there trying to hold back tears. Alex didn't even bother to tell me himself. He just left without so much as a goodbye, leaving me to deal with the fallout alone. I feel so stupid for ever thinking he cared about me. He got what he wanted, excitement, attention, and maybe even a little thrill from the danger. And now he's moved on like none of it ever happened. Knowing that Alex is gone has left me feeling completely abandoned. I risked everything for him, my marriage, my reputation, my stability, and he couldn't even be bothered to stick around when things got tough. It's painfully clear that I was nothing more than a temporary distraction for him, something to pass the time until he found his next opportunity. The realization has been like a slap in the face, a reminder of just how far I've fallen and how little I have left. Work has become unbearable. The whispers haven't stopped, and now that Alex is gone, I've become the sole focus of everyone's judgment. People avoid me in the hallways, keep their distance during meetings, and make it clear that I'm no longer welcome in the social circles I used to be part of. Even the few coworkers who were still speaking to me have started pulling away. I feel like a pariah, someone everyone tolerates because they have to, but secretly wishes would just disappear. The financial situation hasn't improved either. With Jack gone and the divorce proceedings underway, I'm struggling to keep up with the bills. The mortgage is still overdue, and the credit card debt keeps piling up. I've been trying to cut back on expenses, but it feels like every time I make a dent, something else comes up that wipes out any progress I've made. The stress is overwhelming, and there are nights when I just sit on the couch, staring at the stack of bills on the table, wondering how I'm going to get through this. The house feels emptier than ever. Every little thing reminds me of Jack, his old t-shirts in the laundry, the picture of us from our honeymoon that I can't bring myself to take down, even the dog, who seems to spend most of her time lying by the door, waiting for him to come home. I used to think of this house as our sanctuary, the place where we built our life together. Now it feels like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of what used to be. I hate being here, but I don't know where else to go. The hardest part of all this is the isolation. I don't have anyone to turn to. My family is still upset with me, Jack's family wants nothing to do with me, and my friends have all taken sides, his side. I tried reaching out to a few people, hoping to explain my side of the story, or at least find some kind of support, but the responses have been cold and dismissive. It's like I've been erased from everyone's lives, left to deal with the consequences of my actions completely on my own. And then there's Brian. I can't stop thinking about him and how he's the one who started this whole mess. If he hadn't opened his mouth at the Christmas party, none of this would be happening. I know it's not fair to blame him entirely. After all, I'm the one who had the affair, but I can't help but feel like he took it upon himself to ruin my life. He could have confronted me privately or minded his own business, but instead he chose to make a spectacle out of it, humiliating me in front of everyone. Now he's being praised as some kind of hero, while I'm left to pick up the pieces of a life that feels beyond repair. I don't know what to do anymore. Every day feels like a battle just to keep going, and I'm running out of strength. I've lost my husband, my reputation, and the man I thought I could build a future with. I'm drowning in debt, cut off from the people who used to care about me, and I don't see a way out of this mess. I feel like I've hit rock bottom, and I don't know how to climb back up. Reddit, I'm begging for advice. How do I move forward from this? How do I rebuild my life when everything I had is gone? I know I've made mistakes, huge, unforgivable mistakes, but I can't keep living like this. Please, if anyone has been through something similar or has any words of wisdom, I need your help. I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this.